Welcome to EdTech Monday. Now, worldwide, more than 80 million people are currently uprooted by wars, persecution, including more than 26.4 million refugees. That number is rapidly rising, even as countries grapple with the rising number of refugees. There's an even bigger crisis looming than that of availing education to displaced people. According to UNHCR, only 68% are enrolled in primary school, 34% in secondary school, and 5% in tertiary education. In Africa, millions of refugee students are struggling to catch up with their education. Even when they're at school, refugee students in Africa often learn in extremely tough conditions, in overcrowded classes with limited resources. Is EdTech then the answer that will bridge the challenge to availing quality education to learners in these displaced communities? To discuss this today, I have a competent panel of individuals today and allow them to introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Ignatius.
Thank you. My name is Ignatius. I work with Save the Children as the education specialist. Thank you for having me.
So glad to have you.
Sandra Cheng is my name. I work as the Diversity and Content Generation Lead at the Wikimedia Community User Group, Uganda. Thank you.
And I am Romeo Ronald Lomora. I am the co-founder and as well as the project manager at Platform Africa.
Romeo, in our introduction to the show, it says that there's tough learning conditions for refugees within refugee communities, and I know that you've been within these refugee communities. Is it true that there are tough learning conditions? Is it something you've witnessed?
Yeah, actually, as to me, I can say it's true. The conditions, depending on actually the conditions, but to me, I look at the conditions in terms of like access to education resources, looking at issues of teacher to PP ratio, and then looking at, of course, at availability of things that actually can enhance education to go more better. This one, I say yes, it is true. And I believe in our discussion, we shall look into details of exactly what are those things, like from my perspective, maybe later if we get into talk around that. What are those things and how are those things affected and how does actually EdTech comes into to solve some of those particular issues.
Sandra, do you agree with Romeo in the times that you've been in these refugee communities doing work? Have you faced these challenges, these education challenges?
Yes, I would say to a greater extent because we will go to the refugee settlement, to be specific, the Rhino refugee settlement. And one of the biggest challenge is access to electricity. When we are conducting trainings for refugees, you find that we use generator, and now with the increasing price of fuel, it might be really hard for us since we intend to conduct the next training in July. And of course, also there's the aspect of the broadband connectivity. The internet is not really very good. The connectivity is not the best, but we have been trying to get access to available internet such as Airtel to ensure that we conduct our training successfully. So yes, I would strongly agree to what Romeo said.
Ignatius, what's the scale of this problem in the communities that you're working with?
I don't know what you mean by scale, but if you ask me the magnitude,
okay, the magnitude.
Yes, it's really big, and as he said, and of late we've had challenges with space, learning space. We saw an increase in the number of children coming back to school. Where there's a shortage of classrooms, there's a shortage of teachers. Even the administrators are overwhelmed. Everyone is working around the clock to make sure that we have at least education going on in these refugee settlements, but it's not an easy task. But I'm glad there are people, organizations, the government, Office of the Prime Minister, everyone is working together to make sure that we extend education to this land.
Proposing technology as a solution in refugee settlements can be a hard bargain. We've had Sandra telling you access to just basic receivership network from the existing infrastructure. But even just the technology itself, technology is expensive. Mobile phones are expensive, iPads are expensive, computers are expensive. So how do you go around that challenge of using technology for education in these communities?
For example, we had teacher training, EdTech intervention, where we reached out to teachers through phones. And we used this most basic phone. We realized every teacher had a phone. So we organized the content. We had the core PTC look through the content. We had center coordinating tutors and the districts looking through the content. We agreed on what we wanted to send out to the teachers. We wrote scripts, and then we contracted a company that helped us to record them and use a system where these lessons to the teachers were broadcasted to the teachers using their phones.
Romney, I want to come to you. I know that we're talking about technology, but before we get to the technology, how do you package this kind of content for refugee communities? First of all, you'd have refugee communities that have come from different areas, they speak different languages. So how do you package content for them, and how do they appreciate that content?
So looking at the content in terms of like the podcasts or maybe the pre-recorded lessons that we're preparing as Platform Africa to share on the structures that Ray has mentioned as Save the Children. So one thing that we considered at the moment was we looked at our different target audiences who are the children, but in different classes. So looking at the younger ones, we realized that these kids, first of all, had a problem with English itself. Like a teacher speaking completely the whole lesson in English, honest speaking, some of these kids did come from a very wholesomely English background. So what we had to do was we had to blend the lessons, okay? English together with the commonly language spoken in the refugee camp, which is Juba Arabic. So a teacher comes in and tries to record it, and then is able to, put some Juba Arabic to get the kids to really understand. More especially, it comes in simple examples. So for instance, there's an example you want to make, but sometimes when you make it in English, you may end up becoming relevant because the kid won't understand what you're actually trying to say. But when you make the examples as local and as relatable as possible, you find that these kids are able to be like, oh, okay, actually, this is the thing they're trying to mean. So, and then they pick up easily. And then also what we actually had to do also as well as Platform, we had to put a component of sound effects within the pre-recorded programs so that it becomes a little bit interactive. Because sometimes, yes, we believe that teachers who are actually going to the studios. Save the Children has done amazing. But we had like around 2 challenges around that. When a teacher speaks, maybe the children are all around, they have gone. That lesson is not repeated again. So what we had to do was like, why can't we pre-record these lessons so that they are played at some intervals of times whereby, these community children can gather around and they can be able to listen to the same programs again. And so by that, we actually realized that the community began appreciating it more because the people are able, first of all, to get access to this content. They're able to know this is the time the Save the Children teacher is coming in. This is the time that this content is actually going to be playing from like the national curriculum, And then all these different bodies that were actually putting in work to see that the content goes there. There were stipulated times to see that this goes. And community began appreciating and even they had their own timetable. Hey, this time we're going to do this and this time we're going to have that. And I saw the appreciation, the connectiveness between the content and the PPUs and together with who are our target audience began becoming closer. And that's when I knew that, okay, it's like we're reaching an impact somewhere here.
Sandra, you're also in the content side of things. How do you package content for these refugee communities, for them to appreciate that kind of content?
Okay, so from the Wikimedia aspect, first of all, how we package content, first is we also try to do videography, whereby we record content maybe during the trainings, and this content can be reused, and it's a way of us, of course, sustainability in the community. But of course, we also try to ensure that the people in the community, the refugee settlement, are being trained so that they get their information. For example, we have Romeo that is based in the refugee settlement, that in case of anything, they're able to train this community in the language that they also appreciate. But of course, we also conduct a lot of refresher trainings online. And of course, we know that with the community that we have in Uganda, we have the aspect of the 12% tax that has been directly imposed on the internet access. So we try to also provide them with data so that they're able to access information, but also contribute on Wikipedia. Yes, thank you.
All right, Ignatius, now I want to come to you. If you package content the way that Romeo said, education is also a really practical aspect. You need to be able to evaluate and assess how learners are coping. How do you carry out evaluation in such a model of education?
Yeah, we do it in a way, in various ways. There are times when we do assessments, we get our evaluators, they go, they speak to the children before we carry out these lessons. And then after we deliver the lessons, thereafter we also go back and do an assessment so that we see how much the impact we've had on these learners. It's not something so big, but at least there is some progress in learning. There is also where we have worked with, especially around BDBD, we have seen an organization called WatchChild. They've given out tablets to learners, and the content is offline. And they are able to access this. So long as they are in this school where the tablets are, they always have access. But the way it is designed is that as the child starts interacting with these lessons, it first takes a simple test or an assessment to tell how knowledgeable this learner is.
How do you keep people engaged? How do you package content in such a way that it's engaging, but it also involves the learner in the learning process?
So concerning that, I want to specifically talk about the audios. So when you look at the way we keep our learners engaged, first of all, it comes even from the preparation of the lesson which is going to be recorded. So first of all, we script our lessons, and then it's very easy for you when you're editing to be able to know, okay, instead of just saying, maybe we're talking about the issue of maybe forces, or we are talking about a particular subject, let me say friction, okay? You don't just say, okay, friction, this is maybe these are like forces you're going to oppose, or the surfaces you're going to oppose each other, whatever. You just literally say it, no. What if we just put some sounds there, okay, which are familiar to these people? And then as the teacher is talking, it's like, have you ever heard of such kind of a sound anywhere? And then there's like this way we structure the person like, oh no, maybe you've ever heard or not. And then it's like, this is actually a sound of this. And this comes here when this has happened. So I have a belief that when people or when children are exposed to very, very normal and relevant things that happen to their daily lives, they're able to relate with very complex things in school. So that when you bring up just a topic of friction, honestly speaking, a child somewhere will never understand the relevance of that. It will be like, okay, friction, so what? But when you be like, do you know when you rub your two hands, there's some sound and heat that comes out? That is friction. They'll be like, okay, I didn't actually know it is, but that's how they're going to keep it in their memory. So we try to make our audios a little bit relevant, a little bit to that aspect whereby it picks up. But then we have included something of late, the trauma healing aspect of our lessons, because we realize that these are like refugee communities. Sometimes they get a lot of issues. One thing that has hindered education as well, sometimes the mental health of these children. So we have like the last part whereby we tell these kids how can they best concentrate in class, how can they best cope up with things. We also use sounds, songs, and play in the audios. That one has kept the kids a little bit engaged, and they can be able to listen to the whole 30-minute audio without running away, and they love it.
All right, thank you so much, Romeo. We're going to take a very short break, but when we get back, we'll discuss the challenges of deploying this technology for education in refugee communities. Thank you so much for staying with us on EdTech Monday. We're discussing the role of EdTech in refugee communities, and we're going to get into a conversation now, and I'll start with you, Ignatius, on the challenges of deploying EdTech in refugee communities. What are some of the challenges that you've encountered?
Number one challenge is the cost. And as I think earlier on you mentioned that EdTech is really expensive, and that is true. Really, really expensive. And technology is technology. Many times even expires. Today it might be relevant, tomorrow it's not, it's obsolete. But that is one. Two, there are other things like language. Most of the technology available to be used is made for English-speaking communities, and as you know, yes, English is the national language for Uganda, but very few of us can speak it well. Even the skills of using this technology, any program you bring around EdTech, you spend some time at the initial stages, just taking through the beneficiaries. on how to use it.
Sandra, what are some of the challenges that you've encountered in deploying your tech?
Okay, so I think one of the biggest challenges infrastructure in terms of electricity, but of course also the computers, because we use computers. When you're editing Wikipedia using phones, it's really very hard. So you find that as a trainer, sometimes your computer is adapted by the people you're training. So that is one of the biggest challenge. But of course, there's also the aspect of connectivity that I talked about. The internet is expensive, but of course also the quality of internet that is in the refugee settlement. Because most times the SIPs deploy networks in areas where they can invest or get return of the money that they have put in place. But of course, I think also one of the challenge also is the infrastructure, still about the structure of the place where we work with. Currently, we are working with Platform Africa that we are very glad for, but the space has become a little bit smaller because trainers, the trainees and also the people we train are continuing to grow in numbers. So this has become limited in numbers. But of course, also we have the aspect whereby it's very hard for someone you're training, the refugee themselves, to get the article on Wikipedia. It's really a big job. For me, when I joined and I started editing on Wikipedia, it took me about a year for me to get my article on Wikipedia. Because as we write, we also have people who are called admin that are all over the world, and you find that in most cases, these are not people who are located in Africa. They are people who are located in the global south. So you find that article that you have written, maybe we do not have the digital literacy or we don't have the editing skills. So most of this content is being scrapped off and deleted. So that is one of the biggest challenges. And you find that the people you're training, sometimes if they don't have the resilient skill, they drop out from practicing and also improving African content on Wikipedia. Yeah.
Romeo, what are some of the challenges that you've encountered?
So I think my challenges, one is like what Bonaglicious has actually mentioned, the community themselves. So you may have this amazing edutech solution to a problem in the community, but you bring it there, you're going to waste like around 6 months still orienting people on what this whole idea is. Yet we have a belief around when you come up with a solution, where their solutions are supposed to be like community co-created. But sometimes it becomes difficult because you don't have people in the communities who, first of all, know even how to use this tech that you're bringing in. So it becomes a very big issue for them to even adapt the thing. Like for instance, there have been, like the statistics you mentioned in the beginning, 5% of refugees are not having access to tertiary institutions. But we know very well there are like available numbers of like free or maybe open universities online, like Khan Academy, whatever, Coursera, the others which are there. And these ones need like computers and internet. But you find that there are spaces like where I come from, there's a space we try to get a few computers, but then to get people, sometimes actually be able to use those services, sometimes to understand that, okay, there's a computer and there's internet. Can I sit down and now use this information here? You have to first sensitize the communities. Like you have to tell them, hey, there's this and there's advantages of this. And this take a lot of time in implementing some of this stuff. Then two, I have a small issue with schools sometimes. So schools are still taking it like hard on to like accept technology. Because as we speak right now, there are like maybe a couple of schools which are still having issues and banning smartphones in schools. I may possibly not be so much into whatever, but I have to be open. These are some of the basic tech that a kid can be able to access things online. Like we have a lot of answers, education answers are really online. Like a kid can be able to access that. But you find it's a little bit difficult that schools to harness this. So we also have to go through like a lot of sensitization and inform them of how people can shift from like the analog system of how schools are running to now like the digital stuff, on how they can even harness technology to easy stuff in schools. And then also the other part is, of course, obvious. The infrastructure and these computers, they're expensive. First of all, to have them is one thing, to run them is the other. So, like a normal state, when you look at the refugee camp, there's no power. So if you have to have it, if you need to have solar, you need to have enough solars. If you want to have a generator, you must have a budget for fuel every time they're going to run. And then you need to have computers. Computers sometimes need to be repaired. They need someone to be there. So all these things need a lot of costing and all that. But I have to tell you, the costings are relevant depending on the amount of work this edutech or these technologies can be able to push onto people. Yes.
Ignatius, I know that we've spoken about it as a challenge, but have you found potent solutions for this cost problem? Do you have any idea of solutions? Do you have a dream of the solutions that can exist in this cost space?
Yes, there are some solutions. For example, when it comes to run the technology itself in schools or in communities, we have they're supposed to be connected, but there are so many versions of softwares that can work offline. In northern Uganda, we've had solar being installed in schools. This is a one-off cost. Actually, it's not a one-off, but at least you don't have to be there maintaining or servicing it all the time. So they have solar that sometimes comes in to fill that gap where electricity isn't. Then you use solar to run it. So we also have an arrangement where we also get, actually there are thousands of books that can be on these tablets.
Yeah. Sandra, what are some of the solutions that you found to the challenge, particularly the challenge of cost? What are some of the solutions that you're working on?
Okay, so for the challenges, of course, what we have resorted to is, of course, ensuring that we ask the Wikimedia Foundation, who is our donor and support the initiative, because we promote the mission of open access knowledge locally. So we provide internet data for the community, refugee community who are editing the Wikipedia articles and also adding some of the content like Wikidata. But of course, also we are now thinking of broadening the partnership with other institutions that might come in to help, maybe reach out to Ministry of Education, but of course also look at the UNHCR that work a lot with refugees. And of course, they also have a lot of information that can be contributed onto the Wikimedia Foundation. Yeah.
Romy, what are some of those solutions in your community?
So for me, solutions number one, internet access. So internet access, the solution around that is, one, we have already existing offline servers which are out there, like the Hierartech. So basically an offline server like this, which contains like a lot of already existing education content to it, and just can be able to supply like devices, without the use of internet. So you have like universities, these open source universities and open ones like Khan Academy inside. That could be one big solution that could help communities as well, like what we're trying. And then two, possibly like how my colleague has just mentioned here, the issue of like giving people hardwares like tablets, which already contain offline information, and then can be able to be monitored, like for instance with an existing teacher, is better around the issue of internet. Then two, the issue of human resource that sometimes a lot of money is spent into, like bringing people who are able to train people to use this information. I feel like, for instance, if we can be able to train teachers, okay, then these teachers are able to continue with the whole system within schools and are able to train the already existing students, okay, and these students can also continue training. The whole knowledge passing could save us a lot of money of having this one person who are paying a lot of money to be there, and this person is employed. When the person goes, we have to figure out who is coming next. So the idea of training already existing structures like teachers, like community leaders could actually be good to handle some of these community assets that we can actually be putting in communities. And then I believe for me the next one is the issue of hardware. There is slightly no compromise around it. But though what I can compromise around is if we could begin building, for instance, things like mobile computer set. For instance, have like 10 computers, laptops I could say. They are charged. You can have this in school A today, teach them about possibly, let me say, maybe using the teachers to teach something about science, and they're using that. Or maybe you're connecting with teachers abroad who are volunteering to come in and teach children, like the makeshift classes which are happening in the camps right now. One thing we're doing with Strong Gens. So you use that in the school. When you're done, then cover the same stuff, put in your box, go to the next school, and go use the same computers, and you're able to do that. That will save you cost, number one, for space, and save you another cost for also having extra computers for these different schools. So this comes in situations where really there's hardcore use of money. But if there's really opportunity of having resources, investment within structures of hardware and components like this is good, because you buy those things once and you're able to use them. Yes.
I also wanted to add something on what Romeo said. I think also one of the aspects that needs to be maybe invested in most of the refugee settlements is setting up maybe community networks. Because currently in Uganda, we have only one community network, that is Bosco Uganda, and it's based in Gulu. So community network is a very good aspect of internet access, whereby community can just go to the community center and they're able to access internet and also information.
So I want us to get to our concluding remarks because we are now out of time. And I'll start with you, Ignatius. What have you noticed working with these communities? What have you noticed with the change in those communities, and how has that change been positive change? The role that EdTech is playing to make positive change in those communities.
I want to talk about majorly two positive changes. One is the attitude itself. We've worked with the communities who even at the beginning would even fear touching any gadgets that you're working with. There are some you give a gadget, they don't even want to remove the wrappings.
Sandro, concluding remarks, the changes that you've noticed because of the work that you're doing in the EdTech communities.
Okay, so one of the changes, of course, there's been improved skills in editing and, of course, the digital literacy of the refugee community themselves. But of course, also one of the aspects that when we started the trainings for the refugees, they did not have, there was few females. I think on the first training that we had in 2020, there was only one female. But now we are seeing more females coming on board, and for me it's a plus, because then we are trying to close the gender digital divide that we have on Wikipedia themselves, but also a community as Uganda. So that is one of those are the two changes that I've seen in the community. And of course, they've tried to, like the way Ignatius said, changing the mindsets. Yeah, because tech is really an enabler, and of course it can also change the economy. It can remove the youth from poverty, because then they have access to information online, they can network, they can use the tech for advertising their goods, and of course also reach out to people, because technology or the internet does not have boundaries, so you're able to access as many people as possible. So there's been a lot of mind change, and tech is not hard to me, and also is not science, it's really a practice. So as much as you practice it, you are able to express it. And as me, I also try to learn new skills in tech every day. So that is the thing that I've noticed during our trainings. Thank you.
Robbie, your concluding remarks.
Yeah, my concluding remarks is that tech is still a very vital tool, a vital sentiment of how to solve a couple of issues, including education. And I feel like it is one big sector that deserves a lot of investment, regardless of whatsoever. And it is already doing a couple of things, like how colleagues have mentioned. I won't repeat that. And it is just a site that we need to put a lot of attention inside. That's what I say.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much our viewers who've been watching us. You've been watching EdTech Monday, which runs once a month. Of course, it's an initiative of the Innovation Village in partnership with the MasterCard Foundation. We will be discussing this because it's a World Refugee Day, and we want to see how EdTech can help in the refugee communities, particularly to advance their learning and education. Thank you so much for watching us. Have yourselves a good time.